Tonight, we're going to drift into the world of ancient Greece, but not the Greece of golden statues, loud heroes, or fiery battles. No, tonight, you and I will gently walk through the quiet corridors of forgotten temples past sleeping, gods tired of their worship, and through the dim, winding myths that whisper rather than roar. These stories, tales of gods, mortals, betrayals, and strange punishments have been told for centuries. But we won't shout them like poets on a stage. We'll let them unfold slowly, like mist curling over marble, like footsteps echoing in a temple at dusk. So wherever you are, under the covers, in your favorite chair, or maybe just lying in the dark, eyes closed, take a deep breath. With me, in and out, let the weight of your body settle. You're safe now. Nothing is required of you except to listen or drift off, or both, now. Let's step softly into the myth, beginning not with a hero, but with something older. A silence that came before the gods. Before there were gods on Olympus, before mortals roamed the hills of Attica or the olive groves of Crete, there was only silence. A long, slow, yawning quiet, and a darkness without malice or fear, just stillness. The Greeks called this moment chaos, but not chaos like we think of it, not noise or disorder. In ancient Greek, chaos meant a gap, a yawning, open space, a breath taken before the world begins. In that stillness, things did not explode into being. They stirred, gently, like thoughts forming in a mind asleep. From chaos came Gaia, Earth, not a planet, but a presence, solid, patient. She lay beneath everything else, eternal and enduring. If you imagine her now, she is not a woman, not a mother, but a landscape, vast, unmoving, and old. The kind of presence that makes you quiet just by standing in it. Soon after, Uranus emerged, the sky, draping himself over Gaia like a cold mist over a quiet field. And together, without love, but through necessity, they produced the first of many beings. They were not gods as you might imagine them, not yet. They were titans, tall and strange, beautiful, perhaps, but not kind. Each carried something of their parents, the slow gravity of Gaia, the distant silence of Uranus. One of them, Cronus, would eventually change everything, but not yet, for a long time. The Titans ruled in stillness, not peace exactly, but something close. The world was slow then, unformed. The sea had not yet found its rhythm. The mountains had not yet decided how high they would stretch, and deep beneath, in hidden corners of the earth, things were stirring, quietly, Not all the children of Gaia and Uranus were welcome. Some were cyclopes with a single eye, not grotesque, but strange. Some were hecatonchires, beings with 50 heads and 100 hands, not monsters, but too much. Too much for Uranus. At least, so he pushed them back inside the earth, into Gaia's own body, locked them, their hidden dot, and Gaia, she who endures, began to ache. That ache, that pressure of life forced beneath stone, was the beginning of rebellion. And Cronus, sharp of mind and cold of heart, agreed to help. He waited, scythe in hand, until Uranus came down to cover the earth again. And then, without hesitation or drama, he cut the sky away from the land. It was not glorious, it was not kind, but it was necessary. And so began a new age. The Titans ruled now, with Cronus at their head. He took a wife, his sister, Rhea, together. They had children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, and, eventually, Zeus. But Cronus had learned something from his father. Children rise against their parents, so he swallowed them, one by one, not out of rage, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Imagine it, not as a grotesque act, but a quiet one. A father, pacing, nervous. A child, just born, and then gone. Held inside him, voices muffled in his belly, like dreams that never surface. Only one. Escaped Zeus, and he would return, as children always do, with a plan and a storm. But that is a story for the next part. Zeus was not born in safety. He was born in secret. Rhea, his mother, had watched 5 of her children swallowed by their father. Not with violence, not in public, but in quiet, private dread. Each time a child was born, Cronus opened his mouth and consumed them, not as punishment, but as prevention. Rhea begged him to stop. She pleaded with Gaia, with the silent sky, with her own hands. But Cronus was ruled by fear, and fear rarely listens. So, with her 6th child, Rhea did something different. She ran. She crossed the earth in silence, carrying her unborn child beneath her robes, barefoot on cold stone, slipping past groves of olive and streams too young to have names. And in the far-off island of Crete, a quiet place where mountains leaned protectively against the sky, she found a cave, cool, damp, hidden from sight. There, surrounded by stone and silence, no trumpets, no thunder, just the quiet cry of a newborn and the slow beat of his mother's heart to fool Cronus. Rhea swaddled a stone in cloth and placed it in her husband's hands. Cronus, too proud to look closely, swallowed the bundle and believed he was safe. But under the earth, in the echoing dark, the real child grew. Now imagine that cave, not as a prison, but as a cradle. The rock cool beneath your hands. You hear water drip rhythmically from stalactites above, a slow, ancient rhythm, like the ticking of a world that has not yet decided what it wants to be. The infant Zeus is fed on goat's milk. A magical goat named Amalthea and honey gathered from wild bees. No gods watch him, no mortals, no mortals, no he is there. But the cave remembers. He is guarded by the Crete's young men who dance and clash their spears, drowning out his cries with rhythm and steel. So his father never hears, and the child grows, not like a mortal boy, not over years, but faster, stronger, like a storm building on the horizon. First a breeze, then a wind, then something more. One day, the child becomes a young man, and he is ready. But this is not a tale of revenge. Not yet. This is a tale of quiet preparation. Before he storms Olympus, Zeus learns the ways of justice, of patience, of cunning. He walks alone under trees whose leaves speak in ancient tones. He listens to the stars. He wrestles with the ideas of mercy and vengeance, of order and freedom, because Zeus, for all his future flaws, is not merely a thunderbolt waiting to be thrown. He is, at this moment, the world's first question: what happens when fear creates resistance? The answer begins to form when he meets Metis, the goddess of wisdom. She is clever, quiet, older than him, in thought, if not in body. And she tells him what he must do. Together, they craft a potion, a bitter draught, not for destruction, but for memory. Zeus returns, cloaked in the form of a cupbearer, the servant who brings drink to the king. Cronus, old and weary, takes the cup without question. He drinks, and he begins to cough. Not just once, but again, and again. A shudder rolls through his body, a groan, a heave, and then the impossible. From his mouth, fully formed, emerge Zeus's brothers and sisters. Not infants, not ghosts, but living, breathing gods. Silent, stunned, blinking in the light. Hestia, firstborn, goddess of the hearth. Demeter, of the harvest. Hera, queenly and proud. Hades, silent as shadow. Poseidon, whose breath smells faintly of salt and tide. They are whole, waiting, and they remember. This is not a victory, not yet. But it is a beginning. Zeus and his siblings gather in the high places of the world. On mountain tops that pierce the clouds where the stars feel closer than the ground. They do not speak of war at first. They sit in circles and speak of balance, of rule, of what it would mean to create order where only fear had lived. But fear does not release its grip easily. Cronus and the other titans gather to below, in the deep, in the older places where stone remembers their names. And when the time comes, the skies split. The war that follows is not swift. It is not loud, at least not in the way we imagine. This is not thunderclaps and lightning strikes. This is years of silence, followed by brief moments of fury. This is a sky that stays dark for a decade. This is the sea refusing to move. This is the mountains cracking, slowly, as if yawning after centuries of stillness. This war, the Titanomachi, lasts 10 years, and no side can win until Zeus does what no Titan ever dared. He frees the forgotten. He returns to the depths of the earth, to the place where Uranus hid the first children, the Cyclopes, the 100-handed ones. He does not fear their strangeness. He gives them light, and in return, they give him gifts. To Poseidon, they grant a trident that can shake the seas. To Hades, a helmet that turns its wearer to shadow. And to Zeus, they give thunder, not a storm, not yet, but the ability to call one. And with those gifts, with lightning in hand, darkness on their side, and the sea rising to meet them, the gods of Olympus win. Cronus falls, not with a scream, but with a sigh. The Titans are cast into Tartarus, not death, but stillness, a prison where time does not move, where punishment is not fire, but forgetfulness, and the sky clears. Zeus stands now, not as a boy hidden in a cave, but as king. He does not cheer. He does not cry. He simply looks out over the world and takes a breath, and the breath carries something new, not chaos, not fear, but the first hint of order. The wind shifts, and so begins the reign of Olympus. The age that followed the fall of the Titans wasn't perfect, but it was quieter. For a time, the Olympians, 6 siblings, born in fear, raised in defiance, finally had a home of their own. Not on the ground among mortals, not in the deep among shadows, but high above it all on Mount Olympus. Imagine it, if you will, a palace built not of marble, but of cloud and thought. Pillars of mist that shimmer faintly in the morning light. Courtyards where time itself slows. Air so pure it hums just beneath your hearing. This is not the heaven of modern stories. It is something older, stranger, sacred, but flawed. in this new home. The gods are not always kind. They are powerful, brilliant, unstoppable, but kindness, that's a rarer thing. Zeus, now king, takes the skies as his realm. His throne looks out over the world, and from there he watches everything. Every mountain, every wave, every whisper between mortals. His voice becomes thunder, his presence the weather. But being king does not mean being calm. Zeus is not only order, he is also appetite for beauty, for dominance, for control. He marries Hera, his sister, goddess of marriage, of queenship, of the complex, unspoken rules that bind people together. She is sharp, proud, and very much his equal. But Zeus cannot stay faithful, and Hera does not forgive easily. So begins a cycle that will echo through generations, a pattern of love and betrayal, of punishment and silence. Their palace is large enough to hold 100 grudges, and while they argue quietly, in tones of thunder and storm, their siblings take their places. Poseidon claims the seas. Every drop of salt water becomes part of his dominion. The waves respond to his mood. The ocean floor shifts beneath his breath. Ships rise or sink, depending on his favor. He is not cruel, but he is unpredictable, like the tides. Hades, quiet and withdrawn, descends below, not in disgrace, but in duty. He does not rule fire or pain, as some later stories would say. He rules memory, permanence, the quiet place beneath the world where nothing moves unless he wills it. The dead come to him, not as punishment, but because everything that lives must eventually rest. Hestia stays by the hearth, never fights for power, never seeks it. But in every home, mortal or divine, where a fire is lit, she is there. Invisible, but essential. The breath between one conversation and the next dot, and Demeter, goddess of the harvest, walks the fields, planting seeds with hands that know the weight of loss. She loves deeply, and one day that love will break the world, but not yet. For now imagine Olympus as it begins to fill. New gods are born, or crafted, or pulled from older myths like threads from a worn tapestry. Athena, born fully grown from Zeus's skull, after he swallowed Metis, her mother. Ares, the god of war, who never quite fits in, too loud, too bloodied, too much. Like the old gods they tried to forget. Aphrodite, who rises not from birth, but from the sea foam, beautiful, dangerous. Necessary, Apollo and Artemis, twins of light and shadow. He brings music, prophecy, and sun. She brings silence, arrows, and the sacred, wild, Each god takes a domain, an idea, a part of the world that they will shape in their image. And in doing so, the gods become more than individuals. They become symbols, archetypes, forces. But here's the quiet truth they never speak aloud for all their power. They are still children of trauma. They were born in fear, raised in hiding. They overthrew a world built on silence and punishment, and now they are trying, in their own imperfect ways, to build something new, but they do not always know how. Their stories are filled with beauty and destruction, with kindness and cruelty in equal measure. They lift up heroes, then punish them for their pride. They gift fire and curse the one who brought it. They fall in love and destroy entire cities over jealousy. These are not bedtime fables for moral instruction. These are mirrors held up to our own complexity. The gods, in truth, are very human. They love, they rage, they regret, and above it all, Olympus stands, its halls echoing with laughter, with footsteps, with thunder, not heaven, not hell. Just home for those who once had none. And just like that, time begins to move again. The world turns beneath the gaze of the gods, and somewhere below, mortals begin to tell stories. Around fires, in stone halls, in markets and fields. Stories of gods who fall in love, who wage wars, who forget promises and break oaths. Stories that reflect back the shape of the storyteller, not perfect, but familiar. And so the myths begin to spread. Far below Olympus, in the soft soil of the mortal world, a girl walks through a field. Her hands brush against stalks of wheat, as golden as sunlight. Her feet are bare. Her name is Cori, though the world will later call her something else. She is young, but not innocent. There is something watchful in her, like she hears the silence beneath the bird song. Like she knows the seasons aren't always kind. She is the daughter of Demeter, the goddess of harvest, of ripening things. And Demeter loves her with a devotion that borders on fear. Imagine it for a moment. You are Demeter. The earth itself blooms beneath your touch. You have lost much in your life. You have seen gods betray each other, swallow each other, vanish into sky and sea. And now you have one child, one light. One light, one thing that is wholly yours. You want to hold her close, to keep her in the daylight, safe. But the world has other plans, because beneath that field, beneath the soft grass, the warm air, the quiet rhythm of Cori's breathing, there is another figure, watching. Hades, God of the underworld, he does not rule with a crown of fire or chains. His throne is silence. His court is memory. And something in Cori, the girl who walks with golden toes, has caught his eye. Now, myths disagree on how it begins. Some say Hades abducts her, that the earth itself splits open beneath her, and he rides up in a chariot pulled by black horses, snatching her away before anyone can scream. Others say she chose to go, that she felt the pull of something deeper than daylight, that she was more than a springtime flower, that she was curious. Perhaps both are true, as is often the case in stories passed down through shadows and time. But either way, she vanishes, and Demeter, her mother, the one who made fields bloom, who painted harvests into existence, begins to wither. She searches the world. For days, weeks, seasons, she walks across continents with bare feet and burning eyes. Crops die, rivers slow. The earth forgets how to be fertile. Nothing grows, and the gods on Olympus begin to worry. Because without Demeter, the humans suffer. And if the humans perish, who will pray? Eventually, Zeus, in one of his rare moments of compromise, sends Hermes, the messenger god, down to the underworld, not to demand Cori's return, just to ask Dot, and so Hermes descends, swift, silver-winged, into the realm of Hades. There, in the quiet halls below, he finds Cori, but she is changed. She is still herself, but she has a new name now. Parsephone, Queen of the Underworld. She sits beside Hades, not chained, not sobbing, but poised, still like a statue made of breath and bone. Hermes gives the message. The world is dying. Your mother is grieving. Will you come back? And Persephone, who has tasted the food of the dead, who has walked through shadows and heard the voices of all who ever lived, says yes. But Dot, she has eaten 6 seeds of a pomegranate, a fruit red like blood, sweet like longing, bitter like permanence, and so a bargain is struck. For 6 months of the year, she will walk the surface, bringing with her the warmth and light of spring. And for the other 6, she will return below, not in chains, but by choice. And the world will mourn her absence with falling leaves and bare branches. This, they say, is why we have seasons. But of course, it's also a story about growing up. Persephone begins as Cori, a girl. She becomes a queen, not by decree, but by descent. She travels to the darkest part of the world and returns, different, wiser, like all of us do, in our own quiet ways. And Demeter, the mother who tried to hold time still, learns that you cannot stop change. You cannot keep someone in bloom forever. Even flowers fold, but they return. And so the earth finds a rhythm again, a pattern: bloom, wither, rest, rise, spring, summer, autumn, winter, and in the middle of it all, a girl who became a queen, and the memory of 6 red seeds. There once was a king who built his kingdom high upon a hill, proud, noble, certain of his place in the world. His name was Laius, and though he had power and a beautiful wife named Jocasta, there was one thing he could not have: a child. Years passed, prayers were made, offerings burned, and finally the gods answered, but not with a blessing, with a warning through the mouth of an oracle. The gods whispered a terrible truth: if you have a son, Laius, he will kill you. Let that sink in, just for a moment. Imagine being a man whose only dream is to leave behind a legacy, only to be told that your child will be your end. But the king, like many before him, did what humans often do when they hear fate calling. He tried to outrun it. When the child was born, a boy, Laius, took him, and in secret pierced the baby's ankles with iron stakes and left him on a lonely mountainside to die. His name would never be spoken. He would vanish from the world. Only the world doesn't work that way. The baby was found, raised by strangers in another kingdom, unaware of his origins, his blood, his future. They named him Oedipus, and for a time he lived as any boy might, grew tall, grew curious, grew proud, until one day, in his youth, he too visited an oracle. Perhaps he wanted to know his future. Or perhaps some deep part of him already knew something was wrong. The oracle told him, "You will kill your father and marry your mother." Can you imagine the terror, the disbelief? Oedipus, thinking the people who raised him were his parents, fled, left home, ran as far and as fast as he could, trying to escape this twisted prophecy. But again, you cannot run from fate. Not in Greek stories. On the road to a new city, a crossroad, in fact, Oedipus encountered a man, an older man, angry, entitled, perhaps in his way. Tempers flared. Words were exchanged, and then blood. Oedipus killed the man, a stranger. He thought nothing of it, but that man was Laius, his father, and with that act, the first shadow of the prophecy fell into place. Later, Oedipus reached the city of Thebes. It was in chaos, terrorized by a sphinx, a creature who posed riddles and killed those who failed to answer. The people were desperate. Oedipus, clever and brave, answered the sphinx's riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? And he answered, "Man, as a baby he crawls, as an adult he walks, and in old age he uses a cane." The Sphinx, defeated, hurled herself from the cliff, and the people of Thebes rejoiced. They offered Oedipus the throne and the hand of their widowed queen, Jocasta. Neither of them knew. Not then. He did not know she was his mother. She did not know he was her son. And so the second part of the prophecy came true. They married, had children, built a family on the bones of secrets. But secrets, like fate, do not stay buried. Years passed. A plague came upon Thebes, and in seeking to understand why the gods were angry, Oedipus began to investigate, determined to find the cause, to save his people, and slowly, painfully, the truth unraveled, piece by piece. A stranger killed on the road. A shepherd with a story. A scar on his ankles. A queen growing pale with each revelation, until, finally, the truth stood, naked and shivering before them. Oedipus was the son of Laius and Jocasta. He had killed his father. He had married his mother, and the horror of it. The realization broke them both. Jocasta fled to her chambers. She did not come out. Oedipus, in his grief, his fury, his guilt, took her golden brooches and struck out his own eyes. He could not bear to see the world, could not bear to see what fate had made of him. And so he lived in darkness, wandering, exiled, a fallen king with empty sockets, led by the hand of his daughter, a man who tried so hard to avoid fate that he ran straight into its arms. The story of Oedipus is not about sin or shame. Not really. It is about inevitability, about how the very act of trying to prevent something can sometimes bring it to pass. The Greeks believed in fate as a force not just divine, but woven into the fabric of existence, and sometimes that thread pulls you whether you wish it to or not. Imagine yourself aboard a creaking wooden ship, its sails full of wind, its crew murmuring beneath the stars. You're far from home, carried across the sea by ambition, desire, and a dream too fragile to last. This is where the tale of Medea truly begins, not with her rage, but with her love. She was a princess of Colchis, a land far from Greece, raised with magic in her blood and secrets on her tongue. Daughter of King Ates, granddaughter of the sun god Helios himself. She was not an ordinary woman. She was something far older and far more dangerous. Then came Jason, the Greek hero, golden-haired. Confident, arrived in her kingdom with a single goal, to take the golden fleece, that sacred, shining relic guarded by fire-breathing bulls and a dragon that never slept. Jason had nothing, no strength, no strategy that could have secured it, except her. Medea saw him, and whether by Aphrodite's will or something stranger, she loved him deeply, desperately, and love, the raw, wild kind, is a dangerous thing in the hands of someone with power. She helped him. She gave him potions to tame the beasts, whispered spells to lull the dragon, deceived her own father, even murdered her own brother to buy Jason time as they fled, scattering the boy's body into the sea so her father would have to stop and gather the pieces. She left her home behind, burned every bridge, became a traitor for love, and Jason, he took her with him. They sailed to Greece, faced trials. Medea, again and again, saved him with her cunning, her magic, her quiet violence. They had children, 2 sons, and, for a time, it seemed, perhaps, that her sacrifices might be rewarded. But this is not that kind of story, Jason. Once he had what he wanted, grew cold. He decided to marry another woman, a princess of Corinth, younger, royal, convenient. He told Medea calmly that it was for the family's good, that it was political, that she should understand. But Medea, raised by gods, steeped in fire and oath, did not understand betrayal. Not in the way he meant. She had given him everything: blood, magic, her homeland, her future, and he would cast her aside. In Greek mythology, betrayal has a cost, and no one paid it quite like Jason. Now, let's move gently through the next part. Medea planned coldly, quietly. Quietly, she sent a gift to the young bride, a beautiful gown glimmering with magic. When the girl put it on, it clung to her skin. The magic ignited. Fire burst forth. Flesh turned to ash. The girl screamed, and her father, the king, tried to save her. He died too, caught in the fire of a gift he could not remove. But even this, terrible as it was not Medea's final act. She turned her eyes toward Jason, the man who had broken every promise, who thought he could move on, and she knew what would wound him most. She took their children and in a private, unspeakable act took their lives. She did not do it out of madness. She did it to destroy him, to leave him with nothing. Just as she had been left. Then, before he could reach her, she called upon her grandfather, the sun god. A chariot descended, golden and burning, and Medea vanished into the sky, cradled in divine light, untouched by the mortal punishment that might have followed. Jason, ruined, lived on in shadow. He never regained his glory, never loved. Again, they say he died old and forgotten, crushed beneath the rotting timber of his own ship, a fitting end beneath. The weight of a journey that began with stolen magic and broken vows. Now, you may ask, how can such a tale help you sleep? And perhaps it's not the fire or fury that lulls the mind, but the rhythm beneath it all. The quiet certainty that actions have echoes, that love, when betrayed, leaves shadows long and lingering, that even those who seem powerful are, in the end, only human, just like us. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the stillness of the underworld. There's no fire here, no roaring punishment, just darkness, soft and endless. The air is still. The ground pale as bone. The rivers run slowly, cold and silent, over stone worn, smooth by centuries of sorrow. And through this quiet walks a man. He is not like the others who dwell here, not a soul, not a shade. He breathes, his heart beats, his footsteps echo. He is alive, but only just. His name is Orpheus. They say he played the lyre with such grace that even stones would weep, that animals gathered when he sang, that rivers changed course to listen. But now his music is quiet, low, laced with grief, because Orpheus has come to this silent world to beg for the return of his beloved Eurydice. Woman who once danced through fields of wildflowers, who smiled like spring, who walked barefoot on dewy grass, who laughed softly in his arms. But then a snake in the tall grass, a cry, a collapse, and death, far too sudden. Orpheus did not accept it. He played his lyre, sang songs of mourning, until even the gods of Olympus turned their ears toward him. But no answer came. So he went further, down into the underworld itself, where souls drift like mist and time loses meaning. No, mortal man should have been able to pass the gates, but the guardians paused, hearing his sorrow. Cerberus, the three-headed hound, stilled his growls and let him pass. Even Hades, cold and stern, and Persephone, the queen with winter in her eyes, stopped and listened. Orpheus sang. He sang of love, log of a heart torn open, of longing that echoed in every note, and for the first time the underworld wept, moved by his grief. The Lord of the Dead offered him a rare gift, one that few had ever received. Eurydice could return with him. She could walk behind him back to the world of the living. But there was one condition. He must not look back, not once, not until they had both passed the threshold and stood beneath the sun. Now, pause with me. Let's rest in this moment and reflect, why such a rule? Why this one test, so simple and yet so cruel? Perhaps it is a lesson in faith, in trust, in patience, but for Orpheus, none of that mattered. All that mattered was Eurydice and the hope of seeing her again, and so the journey began. Upward they walked, through twisting caverns, past forgotten bones and whispered laments. The only sound was the soft echo of footsteps, his steady, distant, but there. He could not hear her breath. He could not touch her hand, but he believed she was behind him. Time blurred, shadows thickened, and still he resisted, step by step, until, at last, Orpheus saw the light of the surface, the mouth of the cave, the world above, and in that moment, filled with relief, with joy, with love too large to contain, he turned, just for a heartbeat, just to see her face again, to be sure, and she was there, so close, eyes full of wonder and sorrow. But in the space of that gaze, the rule broke and the magic unraveled. Eurydice reached toward him, and her form began to fade. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her body dissolved into mist, drawn backward into the shadows once more, gone forever. This time, Orpheus fell to his knees. He had passed the test in every way, except the only one that mattered. Some say he stayed at the mouth of that cave for days, refusing food, drink, song. Others say he wandered, silent, never touching his lyre again. The man who once made the world weep now kept all his sorrow inside. In the end, he was torn apart by wild creatures, or perhaps by followers of Dionysus. But that part of the story has many versions. What matters is that his head, still singing, floated down the river, calling for Eurydice, echoing even in death with love unmet. Now, let's return to the rhythm of your breath, in and out, slow and easy, like Orpheus walking through shadows, trusting without seeing, like Eurydice silent, steady, full of hope. This tale, though tragic, offers a quiet kind of comfort, a recognition that even the greatest among us falter, that love, even in its most perfect form, is fragile, and sometimes the hardest thing of all is to wait, to trust, to believe, even when we cannot look back. Let's carry this with us, softly, as we prepare to return to waking life, or drift deeper into dreams. You've walked beside gods and mortals tonight, wandered through golden palaces and shadowed underworlds. You've felt the weight of power, of vanity, of heartbreak. You've heard whispers from mountaintops and tears fall in silent caves. But now everything is still again. The myths of ancient Greece, with all their thunder and tragedy, begin to fade softly, like the last glow of a setting sun. Perhaps that's what makes them so enduring. They are not just grand stories of heroes and monsters, they are echoes of something deeply human, of choices made in fear, of longing that defies death, of pride that crumbles, of silence that says more than words ever could. And in the hush of this moment, you may begin to feel it too. The way these myths hum in the background of our lives, still teaching us, still asking questions, still waiting to be heard, quietly beneath the noise of our days. So, if you're still awake, you might gently stretch your fingers, notice your breath in and out, the simple rhythm of being alive. And if you're already drifting, that's perfectly fine. Let the stories fade into dreams. Let the gods return to Olympus. Let the underworld fall silent again.